All right, welcome back to another episode of Breaking the System. Tonight, I want to start with a piece of television that aired on March 2nd of 1962. Tonight, we're talking about Season 3, Episode 24 of The Twilight Zone. The episode is called To Serve Man. And if you've seen it, you already know the setup. A race of tall, quiet, hyper-intelligent aliens called the Canamites arrived on Earth. They didn't bring any weapons. They didn't have any demands. They just started handing out gifts. And these gifts included things like unlimited energy, the end of famine, cures for diseases, and the sudden disappearance of all war. On their first visit, they leave behind a book written in their own language, and a cartographer named Michael Chambers spends months translating the title. And when he finally cracks it, the whole world exhales. And the title is, we'll tell you as soon as we come right back.
The curtains rise, the lights burn bright. You're blinded now, can't see the fight. Smoke and mirrors, they lead the way. Fooling hearts night after day. Welcome to the show, it's all pretend. The smiles, the lies, the perfect end.
So welcome back to episode 82 of Breaking the System, where it's all pretend, everything is all pretend, and the title tonight is The Cookbook in the Clouds, What's for Dinner? And so the title of the book that Michael Chambers spent months translating was called To Serve Man. And so humanity stops asking questions. We stop building our own systems. We line up for the ships that will take us to the aliens' home planet. And then, right at the boarding ramp, Chambers' colleague runs up screaming, "Mr. Chambers, don't get on that ship. To Serve Man is a cookbook." Let that sink in. That's right, it's a play on words. It's one of the cleanest twists in television history because it turns on a single linguistic ambiguity. To serve man can mean to care for humanity, which the aliens were, or it can also mean to prepare humanity as the main course. Which they were also doing that as well. Now jump forward to today. We're not staring at spaceships. We're not staring at data centers, training runs, and natural processing units, right? But the pitch we're hearing is almost identical to that. So the idea is that the people build large AI systems, and they're selling us the definition 1, which is total service. They say these tools will help solve things like climate change and accelerate medicine. We can write our own codes. We can optimize logistics. And we can give every person a personal team of experts, right? It's like you can, depending on how much you want to pay, right? You can write your own songs. You can make your own movies or your own commercials, or you can make basically whatever you can come up with, as long as you know the prompt and how to make it, okay? And so you have your own team of experts at the click of a button, right? And at the same time, under the surface, definition 2 is already operating. Not physical consumption, but the steady extraction of human data, human writing, human labor, and increasingly, human cognitive effort. And that material is being turned into high-density tokens that power a new kind of utility. And today we're looking at the cookbook in the cloud. And to understand it, we have to look at the language the industry uses, the court cases that reveal how the models are fed, and the quiet shift happening in how we think. Okay? So let's start with the public opinion. We're going to go back a couple years. In September of 2024, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman published an essay called The Intelligence Age. And in it, he writes that in the next couple of decades, we will be able to do things that would have seemed like magic to our grandparents. He describes a future where each of us has a personal AI team full of virtual experts in different areas, working together to create almost anything that you or I could imagine, right? And we can see a lot of that today, even just 2 years later. Like, think of the stuff that we can do today that we couldn't do 2 years ago or 5 years ago. It's kind of crazy in reality. And so a year and a half later at BlackRock's U.S. Infrastructure Summit in March of this year, Altman went even further. He said, "We see a future where intelligence is a utility like electricity or water, and people buy it from us on a meter and use it for whatever they want to use it for." He even borrowed the old nuclear era phrase, and said the goal is to make intelligence too cheap to meter. That's kind of crazy, right? So the more you want to turn the spigot on, the more you want to meter, right? The more money that you have, the more access to AI that you have, and the smarter that you can possibly become, right? It's super scary thinking that money will, in essence, buy you intelligence, right? And that's kind of where the future's headed if we look at it down this road or in this perspective, so to speak. So on the surface, that sounds democratic, right? Democratizing. Who would not want abundant, inexpensive energy the way we have cheap electricity? Well, is energy really that cheap nowadays? And that's something else to think about, right? There's a couple different ways that they could take this. We could take it the TV route, where TVs were really expensive in the beginning. Like, if you wanted a nice big TV, like, you're going to shell out some big bucks, right? And as society has progressed, and as the marketing and the consumption and the production of TVs has progressed, they've become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Like, you can buy, I think I seen an 85-inch TV the other day in Walmart for like $600 or $700. Like, that's insane. An 85-inch for that cheap, right? Or it could be the other way, like electricity. The more that we use it, the more that the powers that be are going to be like, hey, let's start throttling this down a little bit, right? And see how much consumers are going to pay for the higher end stuff. And if they pay for it, right, in a couple years, we'll throttle it down just a little bit more. And then a couple years later, we'll throttle it down just a little bit more. Kind of like they do with our electricity, right? Every year electricity goes up, even though we're throwing in things like solar panels and wind farms and batteries and this and that and all of these other things, right? It's supposed to be making electricity a lot cheaper, but in reality, we're consuming more, so they're just going to charge us more for it. And so AI could potentially go down that road. And at what point are they going to price us, right? The majority, right? The blue collar workers, are they going to price us out of even being able to use AI, right? And if we're so used to using it to where we can't cognitively or critically think for ourselves, think of all the power that we give up within that knowledge. And then think about who is going to have that knowledge moving forward, right? And that's a very scary dystopian future, okay? And so when we frame it like that, intelligence becomes something you can turn on and off, something you purchase by the unit, something that flows into your life the way that water kind of flows out of a faucet. But utilities have a quiet requirement. Once a society organizes itself around a utility, the utility becomes hard to live without. And if the meter is the only practical source of the thing you need, the provider of the meter gains the leverage, right? We're talking about these big AI guys, okay? And so the question isn't whether the service is useful. The question is whether what happens to the muscles we stop using once the service is always available, right? And that's kind of what I was talking about a while ago. Like once we stop critically thinking and we don't use it every day and we don't pass it down from generation to generation to generation, right? Your kids and my kids and their kids and our grandkids and our grandkids, they're not going to know or understand how to critically think about things because they've never had to do it. It's kind of like if you or I, right, we've not enlisted, we haven't done the draft in years. What happens if they bring the draft back and we have to go and fight in war? Like, we've never had to do it before, right? It's a scary situation, okay? And so while the public language is about service, the legal record shows something closer to consumption. And in December of 23, the New York Times sued Microsoft and OpenAI in the Southern District of New York. And the complaint alleges that the companies copied millions of Times articles, investigations, opinion pieces, reviews, without permission or payment in order to train the model, right? The AI model they're trying to train. And so the core argument isn't only that the copying was unauthorized, it's that the resulting chatbots now compete directly with the very content they were trained on, right? And so lead counsel for the Times put it plainly, these bots compete with the content they are trained on. That's the double meaning in action. Decades of human reporting and writing and editing and fact-checking become the raw material, right? That's what we're feeding into this machine. And the output is a system that can summarize an 18th-month investigation in literal seconds. Answer a question by synthesizing multiple articles or generating near verbatim passages. And in some documented cases, the models have reproduced long stretches of copyrighted reporting when they're prompted, right? So depending on how we're prompting these things, they produce copyrighted material. And thinking that you have put in the right method of getting a unique answer, when in reality it's not, okay? And so OpenAI and Microsoft have argued this falls under fair use, that the models are learning patterns the way a person learns by reading. But a person who reads a library does not then answer a billion queries an hour while undercutting the authors of those books at an industrial scale. And that's something we gotta think about those things. And so scale, right? Scale changes the nature of the conversation. Scale changes the nature of the transactions that are taking place. And so this pattern isn't limited to journalism. Programmers have watched models trained on public code repositories generate working functions that look a lot like the original open source work. Artists have seen stylized, absorbed, and reproduced. Writers have found their distinctive voice patterns echoed back, and the system digests the digital footprint of human creative labor and returns a product designed in part to reduce the need for that same labor. So, and we've all used it, right? We've all used the programs. We've all used OpenAI and ChatGPT and Gemini and Grok and Suno and all these programs. We've all used them. We've all tried them out, okay? But in doing so, the labor that we used to do as humans is no longer needed because the computer, the AI, is doing it for us. And like we talked about just a little bit ago, at what point do we forget how to deep dive into stuff, into jumping down rabbit holes and to researching because we've never had to research before, right? When we're talking about our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, and kids in the future, right? We're not talking about today, okay? Which it is starting to happen today. Kids in schools are not learning, or they're forgetting how to do real reporting, real work that is a combination, right? As a culmination of all their hard work, and then they produce a 5-page paper or a 10-page paper or whatever it is. Kids are forgetting how to do that, or they don't know how to do that already, right? Blow that out, extrapolate that out in the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years. What is that going to look like as a society? And I know what some of you are thinking. Well, if we apply the same principle to calculators, we really don't need to know how to do math because we have a calculator. A calculator will tell us what 1 plus 1 is, right? And we all have a calculator on our phones, so we don't need to know how to do math. Have you seen the math scores lately? Like, math is horrible. How do we come up with new things to feed into the AI system, into the human system of society, if we're not learning anything new, right? And to learn the new stuff, we have to build on the core principles: reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? I had I had an argument with some, not really an argument, but kind of a chat back and forth in one of my previous videos when we were talking about cursive writing. And I said that, basically that, kids are not going to be able to read and understand founding documents like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and all of those other documents that we need to understand where our rights came from, and not only where they came from, but who wrote them and how they wrote them and what did they write them for. And instead, we would have to have a linguistic, someone that can read that cursive for us, right? And what happens if they don't read all of the story? What happens if they leave parts out? What happens if they interpret it different than what it was supposed to be interpreted, right? Do you see the issue? And so I've tried to explain that to those people the best that I can, being as nice that I can, because I want that open dialogue, right? We want that conversation back and forth between people when we don't agree, right? And so I do think that, jumping back into this, I do think we have to take a step back, just like we'd take a step back with everything else. We have to look at the big picture of what AI is going to do inevitably if we keep going down this path, okay? So what does that look like day to day? One second. And so what does that look like today? When people use these systems to draft every email, to summarize every long document, to generate first drafts of strategy memos, to debug code that they no longer fully understand, something quietly happens, right? It's what we've been talking about. The friction of thinking is reduced. Over time, it's reduced and reduced and reduced and reduced. Okay? And so the need to hold complex structures in working memory shrinks, and over time, the habit of reaching for the prompt window can replace the habit of wrestling with the problem itself, right? Sometimes the best work comes from the hardest problems, the problems that just really puzzle you. And the more that you dig, and because the more that you dig, the more that you find, and the more that you find, the more that you question, right, the more that you dig. And so it is a domino effect. And that's why some of the rabbit holes that we go down get very, very deep, and they get very, very interesting, right? But if we take all of that curiosity, we take all of that creativity, we take all of that brain functioning away, we're not going down rabbit holes anymore because we don't need to. The prompt is all that we need, right? And so, in reality, none of this is inevitable. Plenty of people use the tools as what we call accelerators while still doing the hard cognitive work, right? It's like a tool. It's just to help you out, okay? Just like a calculator. You have learned how to do 1 + 1, right? And the calculator helps you with some of those harder problems when you're jumping down that math rabbit hole, right? And so I can see us using AI in that manner as a tool, right? Not as a crutch. And so we also have to look at the business model. And the business model of a metered intelligence utility benefits from its dependency. If the service becomes the default path for answering questions and writing and analyze or deciding and decoding, then the ability to operate without it becomes less practiced and convenience is real, right? A trophy is also real, right? Think about how convenient life is because we have running water and because we have heat and electricity and all of those amenities that we don't really want to give up because they're convenient, right? Nobody wants to go out in their backyard and pump water out of the well, and nobody wants to go down to the creek and bring water up in buckets and have to boil it before they drink it, right? Because it's inconvenient. We don't like it, right? And so in the Twilight Zone episode, the horror wasn't the aliens themselves. They weren't monsters at that point. The horror was that they gave people everything that they'd ask for until the people could no longer refuse the final invitation. And so we're not locked inside the cabin yet. We're still standing on the boarding ramp. Every new model release, every new feature that promises to make thinking frictionless offers a quiet choice. The system can serve us answers. It can also, over time, serve us up as dependent consumers of those particular answers. And the historical parallel is imperfect. Aliens aren't real. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? The government says they are, finally, right? Area 51, all that stuff, right? Different rabbit hole, jump down it. And so AI is a tool made by people, but the linguistic ambiguity is useful to serve man. To serve man. It still has two meanings. One is a caretaker, right? I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to serve you. And the other is, I'm going to serve you. I'm going to consume you, right? Both can be true at the same time and in different proportions depending on how the system is designed, and not only that, how it's regulated and how it's used, and by who, right? And so here's our question that we want to leave you with tonight. If intelligence becomes a utility we buy by the meter, what part of our own thinking are we willing to keep practicing? Even when it's slower and harder, so that we remain capable of operating if the meter eventually goes dark, right? And so that's it for this episode of Breaking the System. If this made you pause, share it with someone who might need the same pause. Subscribe, leave a review if you like it. If you don't, leave a review too. And as always, stay curious, right? Stay independent and keep examining all of the systems around you. Be curious. I'm your host. We'll see you next week. Good night. God bless. Take care.
Yeah. It don't rot overnight, you know. It fades. Slow. Silent. Sweet. Like poison in the ink. Yeah, we build our walls out of words and pride. Now the cracks run deep where the truth once lied. Screens for temples, code for creed. We worship the lie that feeds our feet. Every echo shake, every thought rehearsed. History written in reverse. The prophets scroll, the prophets sell, and heaven's out.